This lesson is an introduction to the essential and complex concepts of exposure and the rule of reciprocity in photography. We will explore the topics covered here in greater detail in other lessons. Today, we will cover the basic concepts, vocabulary, and how these interact in the process of making photographic images. Important concepts and vocabulary for this lesson are photography, exposure, and the four variables of exposure: ISO, f-stop or aperture, shutter speed, and luminosity. We need to always remember how important light is for photography. As a result of using light-sensitive materials to create our images, we need to learn how to understand and control the available light. This allows us to use light in the most creative and effective ways in order to make the most sophisticated images. The big concept for today is exposure. It is the system, theory, or rules that govern everything we do. It's an elegant system, in my opinion, just as a chemistry teacher gets excited about the periodic table and its balance. I see the same beauty in the systems and order of exposure. There's a chart we'll look at in the end of this that shows the system. Exposure is controlling and capturing light in photography, but the word itself can be used in different ways when discussing images and picture taking. Exposure is a very common word in photography. It can mean subtly different things, and they all have to do with the act of capturing light. It's both a verb and a noun. Your exposure can be too light or too dark, too long or too short, but it can also mean the number of pictures you have left to take on your roll of film. To understand the system of exposure, you must recognize that there are four variables that influence the control and capture of light. We will explore each of these in greater detail in future lessons, but today is an overview of the system as a whole. ISO is affected by the film you choose. F-stop and shutter speed are the camera controls that you will adjust. And luminosity is the available light in the space or situation you intend to photograph. The letters ISO mean International Standardization Organization. No one knows that, and it doesn't really matter, but some people pronounce it ISO. ISO is referred also as film speed because it affects how quickly your film can be exposed effectively. It is a set of numbers, 100, 200, 400, 800, that represents a measure of how sensitive the film or digital sensor is. The higher the number, the more sensitive it is, and therefore it is considered faster. 100, for example, is a slow film because it requires a lot of light to expose, like full sunlight. But 800 is considered a fast film because it requires much less light, like candlelight. F-stop and shutter speed are the parts of your camera that you can change to make your images interesting and complex. Each controls the amount of light that is captured. They each affect exposure in their own way. Learning to manipulate the f-stops and shutter speeds to artistic effects is the goal of our photography class. F-stop or aperture can affect the depth of field or how much of your image is in clear focus, while shutter speed changes how much motion is captured of the moving objects in the image. When you walk outside on a very sunny day, you feel your eyes adjusting to the brightness. You right then are experiencing a change in luminosity. The outside sunny day is much brighter than the inside light, and your eyes have to adjust by changing the size of your pupils. This is exactly how we adjust our cameras to different lighting conditions. But your eyes are not a good gauge of how much light exists, though, since they are self-adjusting. The extremes of luminosity are bright direct sunlight on one end, with nighttime candle or moonlight on the other end of the spectrum. This doesn't have a number system like the others for our purposes, mainly because we can't change it ourselves very easily. It can be measured, though, by something called exposure values, which is way more complex than we need to get into today. Any act of exposing a light-sensitive material is affected by these four variables, from making cyanotypes to using our film camera to making darkroom prints. And even with digital photography, these four variables work together in a system. We use this chart in class to understand how all of this works together. Each number listed is considered a standard measure or a stop within the variable. These are the numbers that are found on your cameras and film. We will spend the next weeks learning more about each variable, then how they all work together. It may seem overwhelming at first, but it will begin to make some sense. Today's learning goal is to simply understand that there is a system. We will learn more about that system and how to use it in the next weeks and for the rest of our course.